So if this is working properly, should be up and running. I am monitoring chat if anyone is curious to ask a question, but essentially earlier today I tried live streaming mobily on my drive home in my car and talking about the updates I've had to what I think of the GH5, and unfortunately that stream, I got bad connection, cut off like halfway through. So hey Ice, what's going on? So I wanted to complete those thoughts. So if you saw the first half, some of this is going to be repetitive. I apologize for that. I did take the video down so no one else should be able to see it, but I wanted to conclude that just because I know there's a lot of people out there who are looking at the GH5, wondering how it compares to the GH4. And since I've been shooting with the GH4 pretty much exclusively with the GH4 for the past 3 years, although, you know, I do rent cameras, other cameras from time to time, but the GH4 has been my bread and butter for the last 3 years. And having rented the GH5 and shot with it over this past weekend, I can tell you there's some good things, there's some bad things, and we're gonna get to that in a little bit. Hey Ron, how's it going? Thank you everyone who's joining the chat. As we go through this, if there are any questions, feel free to ask them. I am happy to try and give as much insight as I can. There's a lot of stuff that stands out to me in terms of my experience with the GH5 and what are my main points, but I know everyone's a little bit different. They've got their own priorities, so if there's something I can add a little bit of extra info to, I'm happy to help out however I can. But the thing you need to know about the GH5 is that if you buy it, if you rent it, if you start using it, at first you're probably going to think, like I did, that it is, while it sounds good on paper, it doesn't feel like a significant upgrade over the GH4. You start using the features, the camera, the hardware is very, very familiar. The menu system is a little bit different, but it's also very, very familiar if you've shot with the GH4 or other GH cameras. And so there's really a few things that kind of pop out. You're like, oh, that's neat, but it doesn't feel like something brand new, something revolutionary, where like me, the first time I shot with the GH4 and I was shooting those 4K files and seeing that and just the resolution increase over everything I'd been shooting with before, it blew me away. The GH5 is not like that at first. Initial shooting, you'll probably be a little bit underwhelmed. So maybe you spend $2,000 buying one of these and you might be like, oh, why'd I waste my money? Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it is possible. But I would encourage you, shoot with the camera, get more hands-on time with it, because the more I used the GH5, the more I started to fall in love with it and started to see all those nice benefits start shining through. Now, there are a few things like autofocus has been a big concern for a lot of people. The autofocus, it's not great. I spent all weekend testing in pretty much every situation you can imagine. So I was shooting outside, I was shooting on a gimbal, the Ronin M, I was shooting interior, I was shooting handheld, I was shooting low light, I shot time lapse, I shot slow motion, 4K 60, I shot super slow motion, trying to test everything on this camera. And the autofocus I tested with a Lumix lens that I have the 12-35, and then I've also got Metabones with some Canon glass. So I was testing autofocus in both of those setups. And the thing that I can say about the autofocus is that it is unreliable. I probably wouldn't trust it, but it's also one of those things that feels like if you know what you're doing and you know when it's good, and you have your settings and you're dialed in, you probably can use it in a pinch from time to time. But you really have to understand the camera and know it and how it works in those situations. Do a lot of your own testing so that if you are going to use it on a paid shoot, on something that's professional, a client gig, a wedding, whatever it might be, that you know that you can actually trust it to do what you want it to do. And the thing that I've found is that it's not very trustworthy. It works sometimes and it doesn't work other times, and that's why it's so divisive. There's so many people split on this thing, because some people say that it works and it's better than the GH4 and it's perfectly fine and usable, and then there's other people who say it sucks. And it's really going to come down to you as an individual. Me personally, I've been shooting the past 3 years with the GH4, which doesn't have that great of autofocus, and I haven't really needed it. I've worked around it. So I think the GH5 is a step up where maybe you can try and use autofocus a little bit, but it should also not be the main reason you buy the camera. If you really, really, really need autofocus, you need the best autofocus for whatever reason, you're an independent shooter and you just need someone pulling focus for you and you want the camera to be pulling focus, you may want to look elsewhere. But aside from that, everything else about the GH5 is really noteworthy. The autofocus definitely they leave that to the competition to handle better. Panasonic struggles in that area. For whatever reason, they just decided not to invest in any kind of newer, better technology. They're just kind of throwing processing power, throwing horsepower at the problem rather than upgrading the actual base technology. Hey, Steve, what's going on? And that aside, if you don't need autofocus and it's not a priority for you, you really should consider everything else, because as I was shooting with the GH5, doing all these tests, running it through its paces, I really started getting used to some of those really nice features. For example, the 4K 60 is a huge standout for me. Yes, it's a little bit lower quality codec in terms of the color sampling, and it's only 420 and it's 8-bit. However, it is 150 megabits, so decent step up from the bit rate on the GH4. You are getting extra frames, so that kind of affects that bit rate setting. It's not all bit rates are created equal. You add more frames, and then each frame gets less of some of those bits. At least that's my understanding. If you're doing 150 megabits per second, you're kind of limited at that. So if you throw more frames at it, each frame might be slightly lesser quality. At least from the stuff that I shot, the 4K 60 stuff did look slightly inferior to the 4K 30 and 4K 24 stuff. Hi, Dilson. The stuff that I was shooting, but not notably so. It's still 4K, 420, unfortunate, 8-bit, unfortunate, but the HDMI output can output 422 10-bit 4K 60 if you want to go an external route. But I'm really focused on just the camera, like just buying the GH5. What do you get and why is it so great? The 4K 60, that's something in the past that I would have had to rent like an Ursa Mini or like an FS7 for. And now being able to have that in a $2,000 camera body is really cool. Aside from the codec being slightly inferior to some of those other cameras, the actual resolution of getting 4K 60 is really nice. And unfortunately, on like the GH4, when I have to shoot 1080 60, the 1080, in today's world, I'm not a huge fan of shooting 1080. I was doing it because I had to, and it really, a lot of times it didn't matter, but for me it did. It was like I want it to look its absolute best, and having 4K 60 is a huge help because I love just doing that overcrank, slowing it down a little bit, getting that nice dreamy look. Oh, it just looks fantastic. In the past, that'd be, an Ursa Mini, which is $5,000 for the camera body only. You've got to get batteries, you got to get cards, you got to get all the accessories. It gets really expensive. You're looking at like $10,000 for potentially a complete Ursa package. You can get a little bit cheaper, but around 10 grand. Now that's come down to 2 grand. And the thing is, in the past, I was renting the Ursa Mini. We do have one at work now because we were using it so much. But in the past, it was a rental, and that rental was like $600 for a week of shooting. The GH5 that I rented from Lens Rentals was like less than $100 for a couple days, and for like $100 you can get it for like 7 days. Maybe you have to pay a little bit for shipping or lens protection or whatever, but $100 to rent the GH5 is a steal. And if you want it, right now, Lens Rentals, there's a promo code. You can use my name, Strons. Just type Strons as promo, and you get 10% a discount. I don't get anything from that, but I just thought it's a kind of cool thing to keep letting you guys know about in case you like to rent from Lens Rentals or you need to get some gear. But that's something I'd have to rent for $600 in the past, and now it's rentable for like $100 and purchasable for $2,000. That alone is a really, really standout feature, and something that if I wanted to try and emulate on the GH4, I just couldn't. The internal codec, having proper 4K, 100 megabit, 422 10-bit is so nice. Looking at those files in Premiere, it just really, that color stands out. And there's a couple things here. So editing software right now needs some firmware upgrades. We need to get everything up to speed with the new GH5. So me personally, Premiere, I've gotten the footage in, I've been able to look at it, but it has not been stable. It has not been reliable. There is another guy on YouTube, Daniel Peters. You can go check out his video where he's talking about why he hates editing the GH5 footage, and it's essentially all the editing software just needs to catch up. Hopefully that's the problem. Fingers crossed, right? And the faster they move on this, getting the stuff updated, the better, so we can actually play the stuff back properly and see it nice and smooth. So that's the one thing. Editing, a little bit tricky. which is why I'm doing this live stream in terms of sharing my thoughts and stuff, because I have all this footage and it looks nice, but in terms of editing it into something, putting together a proper review, because I shot a lot, okay? So in so many different environments, comparisons between the GH5 and the GH4, and as well as compared to the Ursa Mini 4.6K. So there's all this footage that I need to edit, and my editing software is not quite good enough right now. But it's coming. I'm working on it. But I want to make sure I shared these thoughts early, so that if you're looking at buying a GH5 or you're considering renting one, that maybe you can get a little bit more insights through some of my thoughts on it. But having that codec, being able to color it, and what I can say too, and I don't know if it's the codec, so I don't know if it's the added bit rate, I don't know if it's the better color sampling, the higher bit depth, I don't know if it's the bigger sensor, that it's a 20 megapixel sensor compared to the GH4 16 megapixel sensor. I don't know if they're doing any kind of special noise reduction, but I will tell you that shooting log, Vlog-L on the GH5 looks better than Vlog-L on the GH4. There theoretically shouldn't be a difference, because as far as I know, the profiles themselves are the same. They still do the, capping out at 80%, bottoming out at 20%, but it does look cleaner, it does look better, which sort of means that the dynamic range is slightly improved on the GH5, because you can see into those shadows. Everyone was really upset with the GH4 being noisy with Vlog-L in the shadows specifically, so you had to shoot overexposed, but then you're potentially blowing your highlights, which kind of defeats the purpose of log, because you want that dynamic range. So the GH5, while not as good as the Ursa Mini in terms of dynamic range, it is better because those shadows are cleaner. So you should probably still shoot overexposed, but it might not be as important to be perfect and spot on with, exposing for Vlog-L. And I was really glad to see that. And then that internal codec, having 10-bit, having 422 color sampling, and those shadows being clean, just grades so much nicer than the GH4 internal stuff, which a lot of people will tell you is unusable. And I'd probably say the same. You probably don't want to shoot Vlog-L internal in the GH4. I do it externally to a Video Assist 4K, a Blackmagic Video Assist 4K, and even then those shadows can be noisy. Sully, I'm just checking my chat here. I grade the 10-bit Atomos footage. So Steve, I don't have a Atomos. I got a Video Assist 4K, and unfortunately, in all of the trying to shoot and get all the stuff, I didn't test the HDMI out from the GH5. I'm so disappointed in myself, but I was trying to think of all the different things I needed to test, and checking off the list of autofocus, gimbal, low light, time lapse, the whole deal, slow motion, and I didn't plug the HDMI into the Video Assist because I was at home. The Video Assist was at work. I technically could have done it today, but I had to send the GH5 back today, and I just wanted to get that off my plate so I didn't forget about it, because that would be, I know there's other people waiting to get that GH5. A lot of people are renting it right now. So unfortunately, I didn't test the HDMI out of the GH5. I have no reason to believe that it's bad, and frankly, I was so happy with the internal quality, aside from it being not optimized for editing currently, with Premiere at least. The quality internally is so nice, and it's pushing it right to that point where it's starting to compete with the Ursa Mini. I would say that the GH4 and the Ursa Mini, 4.6K Ursa Mini, are not so far apart. I mean, relatively speaking, nowadays, all the cameras are really, really nice, but they are pretty far apart in terms of dynamic range and having those clean shadows. The Ursa Mini definitely shines and looks a lot better. The GH5 is a closer step to the Ursa Mini. Not on par with it in terms of dynamic range and image quality, but closer to it. And I think that if you were to shoot with the Ursa Mini 4.6K and then you had a GH5 as a B camera, that would be a nice situation to be in. You really have to put them side by side and see how they're going to work for your specific shots, because most of the time we talk about dynamic range, and dynamic range is valuable, absolutely. But there are a lot of the scenes where people think about having maximum dynamic range are scenes where the dynamic range is just really, really extreme, and even some of the highest end cameras still probably couldn't capture it. So I'm always a fan of lighting scenes with light to compensate for maybe the sun, a really, really bright source, and then you're shooting inside, you probably need to supplement with light. But I'm getting off track. Let's get back on topic to the GH5 and these features that I started to get really, really used to. Yes, the autofocus, not the best, but the codec quality, a lot better, improved over the GH4. The frame rate options, aside not even just the 4K 60 mode, but also shooting the high frame rate 1080 stuff. 1080 up to 120 frames a second, all the way up to 180 frames a second. The Ursa Mini can't even do that. The Ursa Mini does 1080 120, and it's a sensor crop. So when you go to 1080, it windows in on the sensor, which causes some problems because all those photo sites, the pixels actually are technically bigger, and you can kind of see there's a little bit more noise. It doesn't look quite as good. The GH5 is still sampling that full sensor, so you're not cropping. To my knowledge, I didn't notice it anyway when I was shooting. It was just 1080, but now I'm shooting 120. I'm shooting 180, which is really, really nice. Now, granted, the 180 mode, anything above 120, does take a quality hit. I haven't actually gone in and pixel peeped and is it 1080? Is it 720? They say it's 1080, but these codecs really are just containers to kind of hold resolution. Resolution is not dimensions on a screen. Right now I'm technically streaming at like 720 or 14. The computer's got a strange aspect ratio, but that doesn't mean that the resolution in there is actually 720. Let's say, maybe the compression takes a hit or something. It's still streaming at 720, but like the resolution inside of it looks like garbage. So this is very common. I've done some videos on the 5D Mark III and not being a 1080p camera. You can go look those up if you're really curious to get into resolution versus codecs and all that stuff if you want. But essentially the GH5, there's a 1080 mode where you can shoot 180 frames a second. And that's really cool because the Ursa Mini can't even go that fast. Now 180 frames a second is not, phantom level speeds where you're going to really just freeze time. Okay, so I was shooting some stuff that was fairly fast motion, and it's slower, but it's not, that super, super slow motion bullet time effect. However, it's a nice feature to have, and certainly better than what the GH4 was doing, which was only going up to 96 and 1080, and that mode definitely was not very good. So I really like that they've added those additional frame rates, and what I can tell, the 1080 120 is actually pretty good 1080. It's unfortunate that it's 1080. Obviously, I like to shoot 4K as much as possible, but if you do need that extra silky smooth look, you can shoot 120 if you want. I also really like on the GH5 just all the video features they've kept. So like there is no built-in flash anymore. So you photographers who use built-in flashes, I doubt there's very many of you. That's not there. I do like it though on the GH4 that it is just there. So if you're just shooting candids or you're at a family event or someone needs a photo real quick, you always have a flash. It never looks good like you want it to, and you can use some modifiers to kind of tweak it a little bit. But it is nice to have. I totally get why they took it out of the GH5 though, because a lot of people aren't going to be using it, and it's not a priority. Most of the high-end camera, it's a very consumer level feature, to have the built-in flash. So I get why they removed it, but it is always nice when you can look at your buddy with a 5D Mark IV or whatever and be like, well, I got a built-in flash. Not that it's ever handy. But the video features on the GH5, like time-lapse, being right in the camera, being able to build it in the field. So I was out doing some star time-lapse stuff, and it's so nice being able to shoot those images, have the JPEG, have the RAW, just like on the GH4, and build it right in the camera. But now you can choose what goes where to which card slot. So it's even more helpful for organization. So you can send your photos to one and your videos to the other card in those dual card slots. And that way you don't have to necessarily sort through all this stuff. Because a lot of times what I do is I shoot the time lapse, I get the RAW, and I get the JPEG, but that kind of goes to the side if I need it. I really look at that MP4 file that it creates, a 4K MP4 file, and I'm like, is this going to work? Is this going to suffice for my needs? Because otherwise I got to process all the raw stuff through After Effects, and it technically looks better. But if the MP4 works just fine, then like that's a quick and easy way just to see that time lapse, play it back in camera, show your friend, show your client, whoever it is, that they can see it and go, oh, that's really neat. You don't have to say, oh, I've got to run all these photos. Just imagine in your head. So keeping those features, adding stuff like waveforms, vector scopes. I talked about this a little bit in some of my other live streams, but that's like, it's really nice because I use the histogram mostly because it takes up less space. Like the histogram on the screen is like here, and then the waveform's like this. Like you can't see anything. It just takes up so much space. But it's a lot more accurate in terms of judging exposure, knowing if your highlights are clipping or where your shadows are at. So just being able to pop that on real quick and check the overall exposure level, and then turn it off so you can go back to actually composing and framing properly. Very, very helpful. The internal stabilization when you're shooting video works really well. I was shooting a lot of stuff handheld, and a lot of people will say that, back like when the 5D Mark II came out, it was, relatively speaking at the time, really good in low light. And so a lot of people are like, oh, you don't need lights because it's so good in low light. That's absolutely not true. You should always use lights because the lights help shape your image and give it the texture and the quality that you want. So no matter how good a camera is in low light, you should still use lights. But point being with the GH5 is that internal stabilization. People say, oh, you don't need a shoulder rig, you don't need a gimbal. You probably do. It's wise to use those things still, but the stabilization internally on the sensor is just an extra layer of protection so that if you are getting tired holding your shoulder rig and you start getting a little shaky, it's not going to be as noticeable as it was on the GH4. Or you're on the gimbal and you're maybe like running a little rougher than you should or not taking your time, and you just need to grab a shot real quick. Theoretically, that internal stabilization should help and keep it extra smooth. I don't know how much I want to rely on it just yet. I still have to look through the files more in depth. But my first impression was, oh, it's cool. And now that's kind of updated to like, it's really cool. It's really nice just having that. And if you're in a pinch, you can shoot handheld and it is stable, on the wider end of those the wider focal lengths, and even some of the longer stuff. I was shooting 50 millimeter with the Metabones, and it was pretty stable for being just handheld like this. Obviously, ideally, you want a shoulder rig, so you're kind of spreading that weight out, getting that center of gravity proper. So you've got a little bit more of this going on than some of like the whole close-up jittery handheldness. So I really like the internal stabilization, and compared to the GH4, these are all the features that I'd be going back and forth between the two cameras, and I'd be shooting handheld with the GH5, getting a shot, and then doing the same shot with the GH4, and I could just see how unstable the GH4 was, like something I wouldn't use. Whereas on the GH5, I was like, oh, that actually looks good. I could put that and sell it as stock footage or whatever. My test stuff, because what I was shooting, I was like, this looks really nice, and the codec's good. The Vlog L profile is clean, a lot cleaner. So. And I'm able to shoot 4K 60. And so then I was like, man, this is really nice. It's really impressing me. I like it. The autofocus, not so much. But it was impressing me to the point where I got the Ursa Mini 4.6K out, and I started shooting some test footage with that side by side with the GH5 just to kind of compare those two. Because I'm like, this is really that. It's the poor man's Ursa Mini 4.6K where you can imitate similar looking shots and you get extra features. Like there are reasons you might want to go with the GH5 over the Ursa Mini. You get the internal stabilization, you get the smaller, lighter weight form factor, so you can put it on a Ronin. And Ursa Mini, you can put it on a Ronin M, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. GH5 is a lot easier. So there are situations, and the higher frame rate options, there are reasons why you might actually pick the cheaper camera for those specific features than something that's more expensive that technically has better image quality but maybe isn't as easy to use for your projects. The Ursa Mini definitely takes more time. It's bigger, it's bulkier. They call it the Ursa Mini, but it's by the time you rig it out, it's not very mini anymore. The GH5, small, tight, it's clean, just like the GH5, GH4, same form factor, small, compact, lightweight, easy to use. You just pop a battery in it, 2 SD cards, and you're good to go. So I really liked seeing these advances on the GH5, and on paper the features sound really good. You start shooting with the camera, it's maybe a little underwhelming, but I think the more you shoot with it, the more you really grow to appreciate and understand the value that those features have. In a perfect world, Panasonic would have done the full range of features. The autofocus would be better, there'd be better dynamic range, it'd be a bigger sensor, it'd be better in low light. And speaking of low light, which I haven't really touched on yet, the low light on the GH5 is better than the GH4. By how much, it's hard to say. I haven't gone in and really done any kind of actual comparisons with waveforms and such, but I would say it's definitely not on par with the A7S. That's hard to say because I haven't actually shot stuff side by side with the A7S Mark II and the GH5. So I can't say that comparison, but just going from memory, the times that I have shot with the A7S 1 and 2, that low light, I think the full frame the smaller megapixels just help so much with that camera, just soaking in all the light. The GH5 not going to compete with that. So if low light, if autofocus is a priority for you, probably not the GH5. If low light is a priority for you, probably not the GH5. But if you're happy with the GH4's low light, or if you just wish the GH4's low light was a little bit better, I think you will be happy and be surprised with the GH5, because it is a nice little step up, if you will, not a significant improvement. I'm going to check over here in chat, see what people are saying. Do you get a chance to grade the 10-bit footage? How does it compare against the Sony a7S II? So the Sony a7S II, I wasn't able to shoot the GH5 side by side with the Sony a7S II, but I have shot with the a7S II a few times in the past as a rental. And Sully's saying the a7S II has even worse autofocus than the GH5. So the a7S II is going to have better dynamic range. However, to really take advantage of the files, you're going to want to record externally, because the internal codec on the a7S II, sorry, I'm getting lost in my train of thought. The a7S II, better dynamic range than the GH5, but to take advantage of that file and color grading, that extra dynamic range you're getting, you're going to have to record externally on the a7S II, which isn't necessarily a problem. It's just more to add to the overall cost, and the a7S II is already, I don't know what they're going for nowadays. They started around $3,000, I think, and now they're maybe slightly down from there. You are getting full frame, so that's, if you're excited about, shallow depth of field or control over depth of field or a wider field of view, then you're going to have a hard time getting that on the GH5. The Metabone Speed Booster definitely helps out in that regard. You get closer to APS-C, and the GH5 doesn't have the additional crop factor in 4K mode. So on the GH4, we were looking at 2.3 crop over full frame, and the GH5 is just a standard Micro Four Thirds 2 crop over full frame. Still kind of tight for most people. That's why I think a lot of people get the Metabones, but then that's an additional $600 on top of the cost of the camera. So $2,600 for an APS-C GH5 compared to the a7S II. I think it really just depends. If you need that absolute dynamic range, you probably are going to go with the a7S II, but the Sony cameras, that's really the only thing I can say about them that they have going for them, in my opinion. I think the hardware itself is not nearly as good. It feels awkward in my hand just holding it, but the smaller size, it leads to problems potentially like overheating. You've got smaller batteries, so worse battery life. You've got the flip screen on the Sonys. I personally can't stand. I know there's some people that like it, but it's very limiting that you can only flip it up and down. The GH5 has the full articulating screen, and now that the GH5 has the better internal codec, the log mode looks better. I think it really, if I had to pick, I picked the GH4 over the a7S and the a7S II. So I think I definitely would go with the GH5 over the a7S II, but I think I could understand why someone might prioritize. They're like, I'll deal with all the sacrifices and compromises of the a7S II just to have that full frame or just to have that extra dynamic range. For me, Sony is much more of a true hybrid camera on what they're doing with their A7 series. It's a photo camera with video features. The GH5 and what Panasonic is doing, they're really pushing the video features. So increasing the codec to something that's like more of like a professional standard, upping the frame rates, giving you all these video specific features. And like, yeah, they improve the photography side of things too. They add more megapixels. They have more autofocus detection points. They increase the photography side as well, but they're really committed to video. And for me, doing video production, that's what I'm all about. So the Sonys have always been, they don't seem as full-hearted in terms of going the video route. It seems like just something they add in there, but they're not actually committed to it. So I'm looking at chat again. I got a gig with price with F5 looks better. Okay, so people are just chatting, but no questions. So I think that the GH5, wait for my actual footage. If you wait until you need to buy. That's what I always say, right? If you don't need it, don't buy it. But if you want to buy it, Wait for my actual review stuff where you can see some footage, you can see what it actually looks like, you can see the stuff I'm talking about. I really do apologize for not being able to show some of that stuff. I was even thinking about like pulling it up in the live stream, but the hard drive that the stuff is on is at work, and even if I pulled it up in the stream, it's lower quality, so it's not going to do it any justice. I've got to figure out getting, kind of Premiere to a place where I can actually get this stuff edited together and put together something that's good and worth watching. I don't want to just. I think there's a lot of people putting out GH5 content right now, and I think you should consume as much of it as possible. So, if you're watching this live stream, awesome, I love it. But then, watching other people's stuff, looking at their test footage, seeing what they're experiencing, seeing the problems they're having, and then seeing what other people are doing, and, maybe the things that are shining and standing out for them. For me, shooting with the GH5 felt really good. The files, when I was looking at them in Premiere, I was really happy with what I was able to capture. And, even looking at the GH4 stuff side by side with the GH5, it is worse, it is inferior, but it still is pretty remarkable that the GH4 was able to do that, 3 years ago in terms of comparing them side by side. And then looking at the Ursa Mini, it's like, okay, yeah, it's better, but like, at what point are you just pixel peeping? At what point are you're the only one that notices because you're the technical professional, and like the client's not going to notice, the other people around you aren't going to notice. If you're working on a feature film, you're working on a commercial, you're working on high budget stuff, yeah, spend whatever you need to spend to get the absolute best. People are shooting on Alexa 65s and like all sorts of crazy stuff, just spending, I think it's Michael Bay shooting on 2 of his special custom red cameras just so he can shoot in 3D, and he's like, oh yeah, if it costs an extra 10 million, we're just going to do it. It's like, okay, you can do that, but there's a lot of us who want the higher quality images, the better looking footage, but we don't have those kind of budgets and resources. And I think the GH5 is a beautiful camera right in that range, because right now, compared to everything else that's on the market in its price range, and it's in the same league, I don't know what else you would get right now. That could change. NAB's right around the corner. I'm going to be at NAB looking at new stuff. If Blackmagic has something new, I mean, they just announced the Ursa Mini Pro, and those are shipping, and people have them, so maybe they have something else up their sleeve for NAB. Historically, that tends to be their pattern or their MO. They like to do that, but who knows when the A7S Mark III is coming out? What's Sony going to add to that? Are they going to double down on the video side, or are they just going to kind of coast like they've been doing? Does this move from Panasonic actually push people like Craft Camera, who I haven't really heard about recently, who I talked about in the past? They were supposed to come out with this modular, super cheap camera, and it's going to be great. I haven't heard much about it. Seems like it's probably not going to happen. Who knows? Is the GH5 going to push other people forward, or are they just going to stay on their path? I think the GH5 offers features that like used to be common, used to be standard for the professional market, which was, $10,000, $20,000 for a camera. And you had the tiny little 3rd-inch sensors, the CCDs, terrible low light, and no shallow depth of field, terrible field of view. These like the typical old like broadcast style cameras with what people were shooting on just to have HD. That's where I kind of really got started, was like on those kind of cameras. And now they made the sensors bigger, they gave us the resolution, and now they're getting back to those professional features, the better color sampling, the better bit depth, the more robust codecs. And it's like old features that they're bringing back. Are the other camera manufacturers going to follow suit and do the same thing? I think for a lot of us, it does matter. It does make a difference. But I don't know if that actually is going to play out in, the Amazon sales, or, the Best Buy sales, or wherever they're sold. Yeah, we'll just have to see. I imagine that the GH5 is going to be very popular, and I know a lot of people have ordered. A lot of people are excited about it, and I'm really excited about it too. I'm sad I had to return it. I wanted to hold on to it. Maybe Lens Rentals should send it back to me, but for the time being, we'll just have to see. I'm not buying it yet. I haven't, clicked the buy button on Amazon, just because I don't have a need for it currently. But after shooting with it, I can definitely see when a need comes up, me really gravitating towards saying like it might be time. Maybe it's a rental, maybe it's a couple rentals, and then if that's a pattern that I see happening over and over again, it's like, okay, we're going to get a couple of these and do the upgrade, because it is an upgrade. It's definitely an upgrade. It's maybe not as much of an upgrade as it could have been in terms of autofocus, dynamic range, sensor size, all the stuff that likely will make its way to the GH6. But right now with the GH5, the features that are there are very missed when you have to go back to shooting on the GH4. Just checking over here in chat. 2 strong points. Gave it refunded anyone. So I know the craft camera's awesome. Too bad I'm just like Faraday motors. Yeah. Craft camera. I mean, I made a video when they first started talking about it, and I said, you know, don't put your pre-order in. Don't give these people your money. It's like any Kickstarter, even like what Panasonic's doing with the GH5. If you're buying the GH5 right now for the firmware that's supposed to be coming later, do not do that. Which is why I really don't. I'm probably not going to talk about it in my actual video. I've mentioned it briefly in a few other videos, but like their roadmap of firmware and all their promises that are coming, higher bit rates, etc. You know, higher resolution modes. I do not take any of that as a given. It could not happen. It could happen. It more than that could happen. You know, they could surprise us and add more features. That is all really nice icing on the cake, and I love it. But don't buy a camera, and don't pre-order a camera, and don't put your money down for something that you don't know is actually going to deliver what you're paying for. This happens all the time now, and not just with cameras, with video games, with any product, you know, vehicles, movies, electronics, computers. They say they're going to do all this stuff, and you give them your money, and they don't deliver that feature, they don't necessarily have to give you your money back. And if you bought something for a specific feature, like the Ursa Mini is a great example. That was supposed to have a global shutter, and they just couldn't do it with whatever they were trying to do. And so Blackmagic had to take that away, but a lot of people had already pre-ordered it thinking like, oh, all these great features, and it has a global shutter. Well, it doesn't. So they, you know, someone said they bought the Lily. I don't think the Lily even came out, the drone that was like waterproof and you can just toss it. So really wait for stuff to come out. Pre-ordering helps manage their stock and their supply, so they know how much to produce and how much to make. So there's no like, you know, back orders and stuff like that. But for you as the consumer, what good does it do you unless you need it day one, which I frankly have a hard time thinking that very many people need something day one. You know, I do YouTube reviews of cameras and I didn't pre-order it. Okay, I got it as a rental like a week after Lens Rentals had it. So you don't need to pre-order stuff. You can wait. You can see the autofocus tests. You can see the dynamic range tests. You can see the color tests. All this stuff can help paint the picture of like what is it actually like shooting with the camera. What is the Achilles heel? What is the problem that's actually going to make a difference for you? Or what is the feature that you weren't going to buy it, but now it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to go buy it because I didn't know it was so cool. I don't know if there's anything like that on the GH5. I don't know if there's anything that I could say that you don't already know that would make you go buy it, because everything works the way you would expect it to work, and maybe even a little bit better than how you would expect. Like the shadow detail and the lack of noise in the shadows in Vlog made me happy, but it also didn't like blow me away where I'm like, oh, you got to go get it. The dynamic range is amazing. It's better. It's cleaner. Definitely upgrade over the GH4. But everything that's been advertised about the GH5 is what you get with the camera, aside from, you know, them talking about the autofocus being a lot better. In my experience, the Lumix lens I have, I think is kind of broken or something. Like it was focusing sometimes, but then like other times it like just wouldn't at all. So I don't know what the deal is with that lens, but I kind of stopped doing that one because I was like, I'm not really sure if this is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So then I started testing it on the Metabones adapters that I have. And, you know, if you know anything about the Metabones adapters, you know that like autofocus is one of their like weaker points. Like they're not known for being good for autofocus. But I wanted to test it out anyway because there's a lot of people who shoot with the Metabone speed boosters. And so I was shooting with the Canon 50 and the Sigma to 50 to 100, which I should mention, the Sigma 50 to 100 is kind of buggy. with the Metabones and the GH5. It works great on the GH4, so I don't know which piece in the chain needs the update. I don't know if it's like the lens needs a firmware update, if the Metabones needs a firmware update, or the GH5 needs a firmware update. But the lens will work, the 50 to 100 Sigma, it'll work at 50, but if you zoom in, it locks up the camera, it kind of freezes, it glitches out, and it doesn't know what to do. So I was able to use it at 50, but anything beyond that wouldn't work. People talked about the Sigma 18 to 35 also being a little buggy with the GH5 and the Metabones. Both of those Sigma art lenses, I think, are a little unstable right now. So, there could be firmware. I haven't looked, so maybe they've already addressed it, but while I was shooting, I had to stick at that 50 end. But testing autofocus with the Metabones, it was working continuously. So that was good, because the Lumix lens I had, it would just like go to sleep, like it would stop responding, and I was like really getting frustrated. The Metabones seemed to always be focusing, but probably not the way I would ideally like. But I do think that the autofocus is something that I think could potentially be dialed in, whether it's through firmware on the GH5 side, or and Panasonic releases some kind of update, or you kind of fine tune it to what you want and your shooting needs and your shooting scenario. I think it's one of those things that over time, as people play with the camera more, as they get more familiar, as they do more extensive testing, because everything right now is like first impressions, first week. Most cameras kind of get optimized by the community maybe a month or two down the road, as different people get their hands on it, they test different things, they notice different things, and they kind of add their own flavor, and we can kind of all collaborate to figure out what those optimal settings are. The autofocus seems like something that could potentially be dialed in through a combination of Panasonic firmware updates and community collaboration in terms of figuring out what are the optimal settings for different environments. So I'm skeptically hopeful for the autofocus maybe being kind of refined over the next couple months, but as it is right now, it's just don't use autofocus. I mean, is what I have to tell you. It's like using it with the Lumix lens, which is supposed to work perfectly, because it's the Lumix lens, no problems, and it's like not responding. And then the Metabones is working, but doing that constantly stepping thing the Metabones does, where you hear it like clicking the lens, and it's kind of going through its thing. But one thing that is really cool, and I didn't get a chance to look at the clip yet, but I started playing around with the rack focus feature. So aside from the autofocus, the GH5 lets you pick 2 focus points, and you can pick the speed between the two, and then on the touchscreen you say 0.1, 0.2, 0.1, 0.2, focus 0.1, and then focus 0.2, and it'll rack focus between them at a designated speed that you set earlier, and you get to pick these points, you kind of set the focus, and then you can just touch going between the 2 points. It's very easy, very intuitive, and it works. Even with the Metabones, like on the LCD, it looked like it was working well. Take that with a grain of salt. I haven't looked at the actual footage in proper resolution yet. It was one of the later files I shot, so I was kind of looking at some of the other stuff, and then Premiere crashed. So that's the fun stuff that I get to deal with now, is going through and fixing all that and trying to make a video out of it. But I would imagine that if it had been like a Lumix lens or a lens, I'm trying to think, like the Metabones thing seemed to work well. So it gives me a lot of hope for what could potentially be capable with a Lumix lens or another native lens, 4 micro 4/3, and potentially other lenses on the Metabones adapter. Having that rack focus feature is, just looking at the LCD, looked way better than what most people I think could do. Granted, you have to kind of be locked down and static. You could potentially have the camera moving, but if the points are moving, you can't like reset them mid-focus. It's like you kind of have it the scene set up, but just being able to touch a button and it smoothly focuses and back on your command is a really cool feature that I did not think I would like as much. So maybe that's the one thing that really stood out to me the most. I wasn't even going to test it because I was like, oh, it's kind of just a gimmick. But I was like, I'll test it. I want to put this camera through all its paces. And I did that, and I was like, wow, that is actually really cool. So I'm going to check over here in chat. Are there other cameras that will shoot 6K anamorphic? Doubtful. Doubtful. the high-end stuff, anamorphic is more for that realm, I'd say. Definitely don't expect it on anything from Sony at their consumer level. So the A7S Mark III is probably not going to do 6K anamorphic, and I don't even the GH5 doesn't even currently do 6K anamorphic as far as I know. It's basically the 6K photo mode. Eventually will be the anamorphic mode, from my understanding. But please correct me if I'm wrong. But anamorphic is interesting because you really need good anamorphic glass, which isn't cheap and is really difficult to rent if you don't live in the right market. So you can get the anamorphic adapters that are just a pain in the ass to work with, because you either have two focus rings where you're constantly checking focus, or you've just got this monstrosity of a lens or you have to stop down to make it sharp and optimal. And there's just so many trade-offs for anamorphic shooting that I was talking with Sully in our live chat a couple days ago, that I just don't find shooting anamorphic all that pleasurable. It's way slower in terms of being able to set up a shot, get the shot, have it look the way you want. And even then, most of the time, it's like not as sharp as I'd like. It's the anamorphic aesthetic comes with trade-offs if you don't do it right, which means getting the nice anamorphic lenses and having the time to set up shots properly. So if you know that you have access to nice anamorphic lenses, and that's a priority for you, then yeah, the GH5 is a no-brainer. But I think for a lot of people, it's not going to really matter. It's cool that Panasonic put it in the camera. It's one of those like neat features that what other consumer camera is going to let you shoot anamorphic? It's not even like a thing, But having it in there is really, really cool. Someone says, I think I'll better buy a GH4. Do you know if the GH4 is going to get any firmware update? I don't believe the GH4 is going to get a firmware update. I mean, stranger things have happened, but I think that is kind of sailing off into the bowels of history, and they're kind of focused on the GH5 for now. So he talks about the focus transition. Yeah, it works. The focus transition works really, really well. He's talking about planning a video in anamorphic. Steve, if you've shot anamorphic before, then I love anamorphic. Anamorphic looks cool. Even just cropping your video, having the bars at the top and bottom for that cinema aesthetic is really nice. I just know that the stuff that I've shot anamorphic, I always go in thinking it's going to be so cool. It's going to be worth it. I'm going to take the time. And then on set, it's a pain in the ass. And then in post-production, I'm like, I could have just shot this native and regular 16:9 and cropped it, and it would look way better because it would have been sharper. The depth of field would look better. There's just so many things that I've been unhappy with or unsatisfied with in post-production. But again, I haven't done it with the high-end anamorphic lenses. I've done it with the cheap way, which is the adapters and that whole setup. I've got an LA 7200. So this is the 1.33x old school Panasonic LA 7200, but I've also got the SLR Magic 2x anamorphic adapter, and in both scenarios, you can use diopters, you can use stuff, you can make it work. It's not impossible. It's just the energy and commitment to doing it that way. I'd rather spend that time getting my lighting better, on set, or having more time with actors, or having a better location. There's just so many other things that I would prioritize over that. And then I would, just put black bars in the top and bottom, and 99% of people aren't going to be able to tell the difference. Yes, all of us cinema nerds and geeks are, the bokeh, it's not oval, we can tell, but most people, it doesn't phase them in any kind of conscious way. Maybe subconsciously, but not consciously. So he says, I can only do 4K anamorphic right now. 6K is in a later update. So yeah, the 4K anamorphic right now, awesome, cool. I'm glad it's there, but don't bet on the 6K anamorphic being an actual thing until it's an actual thing and the firmware is on the camera and you're actually shooting it. So does the GH4 have a recording limit? So Albert, this is something that I think there's a lot of confusion online. I don't know if it's a region thing. So globally, I don't know if there's other countries where it does have a recording limit. I've heard mixed things, but I can tell you that both of the GH4s that are in my bag do not have a recording limit. So you can record until the card is full. Now, The GH4 will actually do a really annoying thing where it splits the clip up into like 4 GB files. I think it's a holdover from like FAT32 system architecture, but the clips get spanned, which is really annoying. I actually don't know on the GH5. Shoot, I should have tested that. I didn't test. Maybe Sully can let us all know if the GH5 does the same clip spanning, because he bought one. But I should have tested that, because that's one of the most annoying things about the GH4. That you can always work around it. What I do, if I have like a long recording session, an interview, a presentation, something that's like a long take, and let's say it's an hour long, that's going to be a bunch of individual clips on the card. And when you copy that folder over, I think there's a few different ways, the like media browsers that will actually consolidate that all down. But I like to work with native files right from the card, put them right into Premiere, so I know that I'm getting the absolute best quality from the beginning. What I do is when I pull that into Premiere, I line it all up, so I've got, let's say for like an hour-long recording, maybe it's like 10 clips. It's probably more than that, but like it's 10 clips. It's continuous, so there's no visible gaps. You don't notice that there's cuts, but they're technically 10 different clips. I put them all there, and then I nest it. And in Premiere, what that does is it pulls it into another sequence, but then you have one continuous stream of footage that is essentially your new clip. And if you want to look at it that way, it's just a nest in Premiere. And that way you don't see those visible breakpoints. And if you apply a filter, it applies to everything. And then what's nice about that is if you want to make any adjustments to the source material, you want to do color correction on everything, if you want to do some kind of visual effects work on everything, you can just go inside the nest to like that original master clip, put an adjustment layer, put a plate, like whatever adjustment you need to do, you can do it inside the nest. And then everywhere that footage appears elsewhere in your edit, in the nested form, the nest cut, all those updates will take place. So I actually made a video talking about like a good way to color correct. I think it's called Use Nests for Coloring in Premiere, or something like that. Premiere, editing, color nests, something like that. And it kind of shows you actual what it looks like to do it. But that's an easy way to kind of work around the limitation of the GH4. Yeah, me neither, Albert. I was just looking to see if Sully had said if the GH5 does the clip spanning, because I am really curious. I haven't heard anyone talk about that, and I didn't even think about it, but it is one of those annoying things on the GH4 that it just splits long clips up into multiple clips. But you can fix it in Premiere. So if the GH5 does it, not the end of the world. But I would hope that they adjusted that. Like, it's really nice on the Ursa Mini, just having one movie file for every recording, ProRes. Like, it's so simple and so straightforward, and it's really nice, and I wish that was more common. Steve says, totally renting lenses. I can use your discount. Good, Steve. I'm glad. To get 10% off, just use my name, Strons, at checkout with Lens Rentals. I really like Lens Rentals. That's why I reached out to them to kind of set up the 10% discount, just because I like using their services. That I paid for the GH5, so this whole weekend of shooting with it, I paid for that, and they didn't send it to me for free for like some shout out. Like, I'm sure that happens on the internet, but not with my channel. I paid for it. I could pull up the bill, but I paid for it. They sent it to me, and everything's always been on time. They've always had the stuff that I want, and it's always really affordable. It's like the pricing is super reasonable, I think, compared to like what you'd have to pay locally to get the same stuff. You get it for like 5 times the amount of time. What you'd pay locally for like one day, you get something for 5 days, a week maybe. So it works really, really, really well. Lens Rentals does anyway. So using that 10%, just Strons, you can drop no V, just Strons in the promo code, and you get 10% off at Lens Rentals. Sully says, I hate that the 4 GB files, testing the file spanning now, 99% sure it doesn't. I literally can't remember. Dimitri says it doesn't. It says no FAT32 format. Nice, Dimitri. So I'm recording right now to check for the US version, just in case. Thank you guys for like doing this like right during this live chat. It's very helpful, because all the things that you want to test, when you get a brand new camera, really the best test is just using it long term, which you can't really do unless you buy it, but you don't want to buy it without testing it. So that's the tricky dilemma, chicken or egg. What do you do? Do you test it and then buy it, or do you buy it then test it? I don't know the right answer to that. I just know I don't like to give my money to companies without knowing what I'm getting. So I definitely like to try before you buy the renting system. $100 for 7 days with a GH5 is a minimal investment, I think, in a $2,000 camera. I know everyone, other people, they may have tighter budgets. But if you're looking to spend $2,000 and then probably another $600 for a Metabones plus some batteries plus some cards, $100 just to make sure that investment isn't going to waste and it's actually going to work for your needs, I think is a pretty smart thing to do. But I get why people don't like to rent too. People like to not waste their money. It feels like it feels like burning money. You're just throwing it away. But I definitely get something out of renting. Are there any improvements to the time-lapse feature on the GH5? Albert, there are not any improvements that I would say. The system is virtually identical to the GH4, so I'd be curious to know what kind of improvements you'd want. I've always been really, really happy with the GH4. And sorry, I feel like it's so hard. I say GH4, GH5 so many times, it's hard to tell if I'm saying the right one or not. But the GH4, I've been very happy with the time-lapse feature on that camera, so I don't know what could be improved. Maybe there's some need that you have that's special, but the GH5 it's virtually identical in terms of time-lapse functionality. So if you like the GH4 time-lapse functionality, you'll probably enjoy it on the GH5, but I don't think you're going to find anything new or interesting. Let's see. Check it out, but I think you'll be good. So Dimitri says that the GH5 does not span clips with the 4 GB file limit. So if that is the case, that's almost the killer feature right there. They almost got me with that. If it doesn't span clips and it's just one file for a long 1-hour recording, I might have to buy one right now. I'm just kidding. There's definitely nice, more features. I love more options, better things, and the more that I played around, the more I played around with the GH5, the more cool stuff I saw. I don't know if it was a feature in the GH4. It seems like it probably was, that I just never discovered it, but I posted on my Instagram, the GH5, when you're in the menu, there's so many menu options like any camera. If you hit the display button, so there's a display button that's a toggle for the LCD display, kind of cycling through different viewing options. If you hit that display button inside the menu, it actually gives you an expanded description of what the menu item is, which I thought was really, really handy. And if that was a feature on the GH4, I'm really bummed that I missed it, but no one ever pointed it out, so I never knew. And I just stumbled across it on the GH5. I hit the display button inside the menu, and all of a sudden a little description popped up. So I made a whole video walking through the GH5 menu, and there were a few items where I was like, I don't know what this does. I'll have to read the manual, or we'll skip over it for now. But if I had known about that display button, I could have just hit the display button and got an extra description of that feature and kind of probably been able to figure out all the different things. So theoretically, you shouldn't even need to read the manual unless there's something really, really specific that you need to know. But if you're going through the menus and something stands out, I was like, I don't know what this is, just hit the display button and it'll give you a little bit more information. Do you notice any improvement in dynamic range on the GH5? So Blake asked this. Blake, I assume you maybe just joined. Yes, but that's like with an asterisk, okay? So sorry if this is repetitive for anyone who was watching earlier, but for Blake, the dynamic range on the GH5, the way I would describe it, a lot of people think of dynamic range as if you have two cameras side by side, like the GH4 and the GH5, let's say, and I set all the values equal, the GH5 will be able to see into the highlights more. That's how a lot of people, I think about dynamic range, seeing into the highlights, capturing it so we're not clipping any of those white values. So if I'm at 2.8, 180 degree shutter, ISO 400 on the GH4, and I'm at 2.8, ISO 400, 180 degree shutter on the GH5, side by side, they will look very, very similar in terms of highlights. But if you stop down and save those highlights, what then you have to start looking at is the shadows. And the shadows on the GH5 are a lot cleaner. In terms of, there is noise in the shadows, don't get me wrong. It's not, silky smooth, but it's not the color weird patterns you get on the GH4 internally. Where the GH4, those shadows get noisy really fast, and it's like an obnoxious like color noise that's really ugly, and you can grade it down, but a lot of times it makes for an overly contrasted look, or like a look that's too dark that doesn't really apply for the kind of aesthetic of the project you're working on. If you're working on like a horror film, yeah, you can, grade it down so it's, really dark and you don't see the noise. But on the GH5, those shadows side by side, same shot, because I did this. I wanted to look, what's the dynamic range? What does V-log L look like? Those shadows are so much cleaner on the GH5. And maybe I shouldn't say so much, but they're a lot cleaner. Like, you can see the difference. So in that regard, stopping down, you probably have a little bit more room to work in the shadows on the GH5 than you do on the GH4. This is recording internally. I assume it's the same externally, just because my past experience with the GH4 externally is in V-log L is that it's better, but it's not the saving grace you'd want it to be. It's still, the shadows are noisy, so you have to overexpose. The GH5, not as much. So if you're expecting to set the two cameras side by side and see into the highlights more at the same settings, probably not going to happen. But the same settings where you're protecting those highlights, those shadows are going to be a little cleaner on the GH5. So you probably technically have a little bit more dynamic range. I've actually tried to build my own do-it-yourself dynamic range test chart. It is incredibly challenging and damn near impossible, because what I built did not work. You really have to have some expensive, unfortunately, equipment to properly test dynamic range. So the people that test dynamic range, I know there's a lot of, even they can sometimes get it wrong in terms of like doing the science of it. So I would say from just like my casual, like looking at it, you're going to get a little bit more dynamic range, but it may not be as much as you want. So hopefully that's a good enough answer to what you're looking for. Sully says, I will say this Bluetooth Wi-Fi enabled all the time kills the battery like crazy. Just did an 11-minute clip at Cinema 4K 422 10-bit, and it did not split the file. So Sully did an 11-minute clip, no file spanning. That is awesome. Steve says, the SLR Magic anamorphic set 355070 runs about 700 per week. I'm billing the client. You and Sully agrees made me think about twice about the adapters. Thanks again. So Steve, those SLR Magic anamorphic lenses, I don't know this. This could be total rumor and speculation, but I think all they've done is put their adapter with a lens inside a housing to make a bigger lens. I think that's all they've done. I don't know that for a fact. I should probably reach out to SLR Magic and find out before I start spilling this nonsense. So if you do shoot with it, definitely reach out to me and let me know your experience if it works well. But I have a suspicion that those may not be as true of anamorphics as you may want. But they are very affordable, so maybe it's worth testing out and seeing. Definitely have a backup though. So if you're planning to shoot 35, 50, 70, have those focal lengths in other lenses with you. Don't just show up with the anamorphics. Have something else just in case it doesn't work out. Fingers crossed. I hope it works well. But Sully says that SLR Magic does make some great stuff. They do. I like what SLR Magic. I like the products they offer because they kind of have unique and interesting concepts that are kind of like niche products where like it's not going to apply to everybody. It's not going to be the #1 bestseller on Amazon, but people who are interested in it may like it. I just think that sometimes their cost savings comes with a quality sacrifice, and sometimes it's like really, really hard. Like anamorphic isn't an easy thing. That's why anamorphic lenses are so insanely expensive. At least that's what optical manufacturers will tell you. They'll tell you how expensive this stuff is, and it's so complex. Maybe it's not. I don't know how to design lenses. I wish I did. But I think that, anything that's cheap usually comes with a trade-off of price. So even like the GH5, there are things about it that aren't quite perfect, aren't maybe what exactly you want, but it's a $2,000 camera. Like what else that's $2,000 competes in some of these features? Right now, not a whole lot. So I think Rentals has Hawks you can rent. Sully, if Lens Rentals says Hawks, that I might have to look that up right now because I do not think they do. I've looked for anamorphic lenses online No one on the online lens rental, just other lens renting sites has anamorphic stuff that I've seen. And locally, I checked with all the local shops, and none of them had anamorphic stuff either. So in LA, you can get them. In New York, you can get them. In some other markets, you can get them. But a lot of people are going to be out of luck if you want to rent high quality cinema anamorphics. Like, I'm looking at lens rentals right now, and it only looks like SLR Magic on lens rentals. It's possible it's on a, so lens rentals has the Letus Anamorph-X adapter, and they've got the SLR Magic lenses, and then they've got the 1.33x, and they've got the 2x stuff. So if you can find a place online that does, Hawks or other high-end anamorphics, I'd be curious to know. I've looked, and I can find, a couple boutique shops in like LA and stuff that do it, but it's also insanely expensive to even just rent them. So that's why it's like, the anamorphic has such an appeal. It is so nice that feature is in the GH4 and now the GH5. I wish there were a better way to actually do it and actually get the high quality stuff that I want to get out of it. But unfortunately, that's just not the world we currently live in. So I'm going to wrap this up. If there's any other questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. But hopefully that helps shed some light on the GH5. Again, I initially got it and was hesitant to say that it was like a good camera or a worthy upgrade, just because it didn't feel like it right out of the box. But the more I started using it, the more I really started to appreciate those features and started to see all those benefits. And now having to go back to the GH4 or have to lug out the Ursa Mini, it's like the GH5 is it's missed. It's missed. If money weren't an object, obviously everyone would get one. But unfortunately, money is an object, and we have to pick and choose what we buy and what we invest in. And for me, it's not the GH5 right now. But like I said, if there's a need, that comes up right around the corner, multiple needs back to back, where it's like, I need sensor stabilization, I need 4K 60, I need 4K 60 in a light, small camera body, I need a higher quality internal codec, because the GH4 is great if you're recording externally, Vlog-L, but maybe I need to record internally Vlog. There's that GH5 ready to go with all these nice killer features, and yeah, they do have the promise of firmware down the road too. So we'll see. It's fun times. I'm looking forward to putting together this video. Once I get the editing software all figured out, I can go through that footage and get something turned out. I don't promise anything very, very fast, because it's a lot to go through, and I don't know how many people have actually done like test footage before, but like just having all the titles on screen of like f-stop, ISO, shutter, which camera, which picture profile, like what resolution, what bitrate, what codec, like all this stuff. It's a lot to put per clip. So there's like time invested in just setting all that stuff up, let alone the actual edit of it. And then let alone I'm fighting with the editing software because it's being finicky with the footage and it doesn't like the GH5 footage because it's not ProRes. If they'd done ProRes, I think that would have been probably smarter on Panasonic's part, but they've still implemented, a more compressed file type. It's 150 megabits, so it's higher quality, but it's still not as smooth and integrated with editing as ProRes is. So we'll see how that all ends up playing out and how fast I'm actually able to get the thing exported. I anticipate many crashes upon export unless there's some updates for Premiere in the near future. Someone real quick as we wrap this up, Othello says, I have a Samsung NX1 and both S lenses, 5 total lenses, said they will trade it all for a GH5 or an A7S II. Should I do it? Should you trade an NX1 and both S lenses, 5 total lenses, for a GH5 or an A7S II? That's really tough. The NX1 is a great camera, and if you like using it and it works for your needs, probably stick with it. But it is like a dead format for all I can tell at the current moment. So keeping an NX1 and NX glass, I don't know, is maybe smart long term. Just getting rid of the lenses is probably your if you could do it just for the lenses, keep the NX1, because I don't like getting rid of camera bodies, because a camera is always valuable in and of itself. You need an extra camera, you want to start YouTube videos, you want to just go shoot some test footage, you want to bring it on a trip, you want to strap it to the outside of a vehicle. Having old camera bodies around is nice for certain shots and certain needs. The lenses, though, if they're not going to be compatible, like if the NX mount doesn't continue on and they've killed that line, it's like owning old Canon FD glass. You can make it work on other systems, but like Canon doesn't support it anymore, and so it's kind of dead. There's like some other lens mounts that are similar. That's why I like the mirrorless cameras, so you can put pretty much anything you want on them. And then I like getting the lenses that are like either Canon or Nikon. In the past, of talking about just getting the Nikon lenses, because they're the older Nikon lenses, fully manual, so you don't have to worry about any kind of electronic adapters. I really, really like that, and it's one reason I have a Sigma 18-35, and that worked great with the GH5 because it's a Nikon version. The Sigma 50-100 that I have is the Canon version, and that didn't work with the speed booster because the electronics were all goofy. So there's something to be said for having the manual version, the kind of dumb version of a lens, than like an older Nikon or what have you. But then the Canon side is really nice, because if you do get some kind of electronic adapter, it's just a lot more control. It's easier to adjust aperture. You know exactly what you're setting, and it's just faster to use that way. So I would say go either Nikon or Canon for the glass, and then get a GH5 or an A7S II. I'd say GH5, but that's me personally. That's just my my own bias, or my own preference. You'd have to evaluate yourself, make a pros and cons list of what you like about the GH5, what you like about the A7S II, and then just pick whichever one's more important to you. Steve says he's bringing a backup lenses. Good, that sounds great. Dimitri says it's a great all-around camera, but of course bigger sensor cameras can give you a much better image as long as you're aware of the limitations. You're good. This is why I made videos telling Panasonic that they should make a GH camera with a bigger sensor, because a lot of people who are going to Sony, who like shooting Canon still, who for whatever reason go with another system, always point to the small sensor size as Micro Four Thirds being too small. If Panasonic had made a bigger sensor in the GH line, I know it would be like the end of the world, okay? I know they'd be like throwing away all their years in investment in Micro Four Thirds, but I'm just saying they would win a lot of people over. They'd piss a lot of people off, but they'd win a lot of people over because of the bigger sensor, and I think that would it might increase the cost, so maybe it wouldn't get that many people over. But if they kept the cost reasonable or low, I think it'd be very, very attractive for a lot of people who are looking at other stuff. Dimitri also says the slow-mo suffers as well from the low bit rate. If you have a lot of details, 100 megabits per second is low. So that's another thing. Like as I was mentioning at the beginning, the more the megabits per second, it's megabits per second. As the more frames you add into that second, the worse each of those frames are. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So if you're pushing more frames, but you're keeping the same bit rate, less quality. So just to keep in mind. Steve, let's see. Othello, there's no easy answer. I just know I will be crippled for quite a while, as I will have no glass for either one. Othello, I have 5 FD lenses. So yeah, it's a tough situation to be in. Like, cameras and lenses are investments, and you're trying to make sure that you buy something that's going to last long term. Thankfully, when I bought lenses years ago, I bought Nikon glass, and so all manual, full control. So I've been able to use it on any rental that I've gotten, any camera, any situation. Don't have autofocus, don't have electronic aperture control, but it's right on the lens anyway. So having that lens kit from like 15 years ago and still using some of that glass to this day is really, really nice. And a lot of that older stuff is cheap. It's kind of gone up and down. It fluctuates in price. But you can get some older Nikon glass that's like really nice for not that much. You're limited if you want to use autofocus and you want electronic features, but I do like the security of having that as a long-term investment, because all this stuff, it costs a good amount, you know, especially for just like independent personal ownership. It costs a lot to buy some of this stuff. Same thing with cameras, you know. Having a mirrorless camera, I think, is far better than investing in something that's got a mirror box in it in 2017, just because it's so limiting. Better get that follow focus out. Just looking through the chat here as we wrap this up. Just remember today, we are 19-ish watching him. In a few years, it will be history. Keep up the good work, buddy. We all appreciate your passion. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. I really, I think I've said this quite a few times in the past on some of my other videos, but I really try and do as much as I can with the limited amount of time that I do have. So I do work full-time video production, 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 7 days a week, 8 to 5, you know, sometimes till 6, sometimes till 7, sometimes till 8, sometimes earlier. So like, I do this for a living as my job, and then all the YouTube stuff, I really, it's not that I can't. I don't like to use the client stuff as like YouTube examples. I would feel like I would want to go get approval, you know, for it. I want to ask their permission, and then like, I don't want to open that can of worms, you know. It's just, and because these are like client projects, like commercials, explainer videos, like testimonials. Like, it's not like someone's wedding where I'm like, hey, can I use your wedding as some footage? And they'd be like, yeah, no problem. It's, you know, these are brands. So I can't really use that. So anything I'm doing outside is usually shooting my own test footage, like I did this weekend with the GH5, investing, you know, trying to make something good that's valuable and, you know, looks nice, sounds nice, because, you know, if we're talking about cinematography or editing, it's like, it's got to be good, right? But at a limited amount of time. And then, but I still want to keep the content regularly, because the way I use YouTube, I'm watching YouTube videos every day. It's like my main source of entertainment, you know. Like, I have Netflix, I have Hulu, I have Amazon Prime, I don't have cable, cut that cord a long time ago, but YouTube is like what I watch more than anything else, because I love the authenticity of it. I love hearing from other people. I like seeing what people create outside of a studio system, outside of some of the restrictions, like what people can do with limited budgets. And so I like, if I'm watching YouTube that much, there must be other people watching YouTube that much. And if they want to watch me talk about a GH5 for an hour and 15 minutes, great, that's awesome, because then I can learn stuff too in the chat. Like we were talking, you know, figuring out the file spanning. Like, that's so cool that I'm a dummy and I forgot to test it myself, but I can get the answer right here, and we can all kind of collaborate and come up with these cool things as we're doing it. So I really, really like that. And Dan, so I appreciate your feedback. And then Steve, can't wait to try the Ursa Mini Nikon mount. So yeah, if you have a Nikon glass, you can adapt it to Canon, which is the Ursa Mini mount. So because Nikon, as far as I'm aware, there may be other more obscure lenses, but Nikon has the largest flange distance of pretty much any popular camera. So you can always use Nikon glass on pretty much any other camera. You can put Nikon glass on a 5D Mark IV. You can put Nikon glass on a Sony a7S Mark II. You can put it on a GH5. You just need some adapters. And since they're all manual focus, manual control, you just need the dummy adapters. They're cheap pieces of metal. They're like 15 bucks. So you can put Nikon glass on the Ursa Mini and it works. It works all right. No problems there. How does IBS and the GH5 work with the Sigma 18-35 not having electronic connection to the camera? Do you have to adjust it in as you zoom in? So that's the thing. If you don't have electronic connection with the GH5, it asks you when you do stabilization what the focal length is. And this is something that maybe someone in the chat could answer, because I don't know it off the top of my head, but I assume it wants to know the focal length of the lens itself, but I don't know if you're using like a metabones, because that's changing the field of view, if you need to factor in any kind of like crop compensation. So like for what I was shooting, I was doing 18 to 35, and I told the camera that it was at 35 because a lot of stuff I was shooting was at 35. I zoomed back out to 18 and didn't adjust it because it's in the menu. It's not a quick, easy thing. So yeah, using a manual zoom is probably not a good idea. You probably want to do something electronic. The camera did seem to recognize the 50 millimeter prime, the Canon 50 I was putting on with the Metabones, because that was communicating electronically, so it knew that that was a 50. But again, I don't know if that Metabones, because it's adjusting that field of view, if that has any impact on the actual stabilization and what you need to dial it into. I'd be curious to do more testing, but I only had the camera for a few days, and that was just one thing that was like lowest on the priority list, so I really didn't get around to actually tackling it. Sully says the Metabones doesn't currently work with the 18 to 35, so that's true for the Canon version, but I have the Nikon version, so there's no well, there are electronics, but not the Canon electronics. So I used an adapter to put it to the Canon mount. I popped it on there, and the GH5 was fine. It didn't care. It just, some lens was on it. It didn't know what it was, but it was fine. And then Sully says it freezes when you zoom. So yes, that happens on the Sigma 18 to 35 as well as the Sigma 50 to 100. You can shoot at 50 with the Metabones and the GH5, but if you try and zoom in past 50, it locks up the camera. It kind of freezes. I think there's an 18, but it's kind of hard to find and slow. Electronic contacts. I tested the GH5 with the XL and the 24 to 70, and it works great. Full manual, but it works. So yeah, it seems like the Sigma lenses are the ones that are a little bit wonky with the Metabones and the GH5. The Canon, or maybe Steve's talking about a Sigma 24 to 70. The Canon glass I was using, the 50, worked well. Yeah, you see they're getting 4K RAW out of the 5D Mark III Magic Lantern. Yeah, so the 5D Mark III Magic Lantern has apparently unlocked 4K RAW mode, and they've also got some kind of lossless compression that they're doing now, so the file sizes are smaller. I've shot with Magic Lantern on the 5D Mark III, and I would not recommend it. I know there's a lot of people who are obsessed with the image quality and the benefit it gives you. If you only have a 5D Mark III, then yeah, like, it's probably worth it. But having shot the past 3 years doing 4K on the GH4 and now the GH5 and the A7S II, it's like Canon is so far behind. And unfortunately, well, it's fortunate that Magic Lantern is doing all the work that they're doing, because it's incredible work. It's amazing what they're doing. I just find that the Magic Lantern workflow is very cumbersome. It's slow, it's tedious, and it is a hack. So it's not meant to be like consumer friendly in terms like the way Apple makes their products, where it's like, oh, anyone can just pick it up and start using it. It's really easy. That's how like products should be. They should be optimized so that normal human beings can use them and use them quickly. Magic Lantern is not that way. I'm sure there are people who disagree with me and it's not that hard. It's actually really easy. It's super straightforward. I just found it to be cumbersome, but I love that they're doing it. So for the people who are interested in Magic Lantern, yes, definitely check that out. And then I believe the 5D Mark IV has some firmware on the way that's actually fixing a lot of the problems that were inherent to the Mark IV. So if you got a Mark III, you get the Magic Lantern. If you got the Mark IV, Canon is actually doing you a favor and unlocking some nice features, less crop in video, better codec, I think. So some nice features coming there. If you use the Metabones, you need to factor the crop. That's what Sully says. So Sully says if you use the Metabones with a GH5, you've got to factor in the crop for in-body image stabilization. But that's just what Sully says. I don't know if we can trust him. He could be wrong. Steve says the 11 to 16 Tokina vignettes now. LOL. Yeah, that. Well, Steve? Are you using the XL? Yeah, it looks like he said I tested the XL. So funny enough, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be telling this story. Maybe it's top secret. I had an XL version of the speed booster, which I really liked because on the GH4, I think the XL was a nice fix for the obnoxious extra 2.3 crop. That Metabones, I put a lens on it and the contacts like broke on the Metabones itself. And I was like, what the heck? How did this happen? Like, I wasn't doing anything weird. It was just like putting a lens on, snap the contacts in the Metabones. So I reached out to Metabones, which, by the way, I don't know if anyone knows this, but Metabones is like a Chinese company that like they're actually don't seem that big. Like the product they sell, very, very popular. Sorry, excuse me. I'm gonna get some water. That's what happens when you're talking for an hour and a half straight. The product they sell is very popular, but they're not a very big company, at least from what it appears like, because I had to reach out to their support, and I sent the XL in for repair. Unfortunately, I had to pay sorry, astronomical prices for shipping because it has to go all the way to China. In that process, I asked them, I said, hey, you're fixing this. I paid for the shipping. Is there any way I can not get the XL back? Can you send me the regular version back? And they actually accommodated my request, and I thought that was really cool. Like, bravo to them. I was worried that I thought I was shipping this to, like, I don't know where I was shipping it to. It was kind of sketchy, but it all worked out. I got one back. But yeah, the XL, since the GH5 now has the regular 2x crop, the XL can actually be a little bit too much, too much anti-crop factor. So if you have a lens that is an APS-C lens and is known to have a not very big image circle, like the Tokina 11-16, if you're doing the GH5, the Metabones XL, and you get that 11-16, probably going to have some vignetting going on, probably at the wide end at 11. So just keep that in mind if you got the XL. That's why, I love the XL for the GH4, but then Panasonic fixed their own problem on the GH5, and now the XL is not as needed. But it still is cool for any full frame glass. You still get that extra wide field of view, compared to a regular Metabones, just like the Ultra version. With the Ultra 0.71, 13, I've been factoring the crop for IBS, 1.33 for full frame glass. Haha. So Steve says he's also been factoring in the crop factor for in-body image stabilization. But I don't know. I don't know what I think about it, because focal length is focal length. People are. I've seen videos in the past where people say that you need to. Camera manufacturers or lens manufacturers should label lenses by their full frame equivalent, so factoring in the crop factor to the actual label on the lens. So for example, the 12-35 Lumix lens with a Lumix camera that had a micro four thirds to 2x crop, people think that should be labeled a 24-70 because that's technically that's why it's a 12-35, because they're competing with the 24-70. 12 times 2 is 24, 35 times 2 is 70, so 12-35, 24-70. That doesn't make sense because it's not the actual focal length of the lens. And what I like about labeling things with focal length is that as long as you know the crop factor, you always know how it's going to look on the camera. If things were labeled differently, you'd have to know what they were labeled for, and you'd have to know what every lens was, what the equivalent was to be able to do the math. So it would get way more complex. There'd be way more things to know. Right now, all you have to know is what's the focal length, and then know your own camera's crop factor. That's it. You can do the math on your own. If all of a sudden the lenses are now labeled with these crop factor equivalents, you start putting them on other cameras. You got to know how they were labeled initially and what they translate to. So it would just get way messy. So focal length is focal length. It's an optical characteristic of the lens. It's the focal length of the lens. So, I don't know if that matters for the in-body image stabilization, because it's, if I put the 12-35 on, I'm sorry, I'm thinking live on here. I probably need to put a little bit more brain power into this. So anyway, I'll end it there. Thank you everyone for joining the chat. Look forward to more GH5 videos. I'm probably going to I'm going to try and make one big one. If there's any key standouts, maybe if I don't get this video edited, maybe I'll do a few more live streams. But I'm trying to just do one, hey, watch this one video. It's all you need to know. But yeah, that should be coming soon, hopefully, fingers crossed, as well as some other videos that aren't GH5 related. So if you're not into the GH5 or you want less GH5 stuff, I've got other videos coming as well. Always trying to make, actually, tomorrow is a good video. I mean, maybe it's today where you're at right now. It's getting kind of late here. Tuesday, April 11th. There's a good video. I like it. I like how it turned out. Talking about for everyone who's watching the live stream, you get a little sneak peek. It's about a raid situation, a little RAID setup issue. So be on the lookout for that. That's coming. But thank you, everyone. Switchback Events, thank you. I appreciate it. He says my reviews are incredible. You learn so much from my vids. That's what that is my goal. I want us to all learn as much as possible. I'm learning stuff from the chat. If you're learning stuff from me, that's good. We can all build each other up. The more we all know, the better, because it makes our work better. It makes us more efficient. And I love that. I love just learning every day, knowing more and more and more. And then anything that I've learned that I can share back with you guys, I love doing that too, because it's fun. I like having this our little community online of shared knowledge, because there's always some problem that you're going to encounter, and if someone else has already figured it out, learn the answer from them so you don't have to go through the stress of figuring it out on your own. Steve says, I own one of the lens turbos, works great, sold the Speed Booster Ultra. So man, I'm trying to end this, but then Steve brings up this turbo booster. So is that an electronic one, Steve? Because I've used some of the cheaper focal reducers, the Chinese ones, just the full manual ones. They have no electronics in them, and I was really running into that blue spot issue. It didn't seem to be a problem at first with it. I don't know if it's something that happens over time, where like the optics get old or something, but it just started creeping up more and more, where like in certain lighting situations I'd have this horrible like blue cast right in the center of my image and make things like purple and blue, and it became a nightmare. So that's why we invested in the actual Metabone speed boosters, and I haven't had a problem with that at all with those. Sully says, thanks for the chat. Man, you get so much blowing up. I'm trying to wrap it up, but Jujoku says, I own the GH5 Metabones XL with Canon 24-70, and the Canon works perfect 24, but freezes if you try to zoom. I've talked to Metabones and they are coming. So yes, these zoom lenses with the Metabones and the GH5 there seems to be some issue. I don't know. It's not an issue on the GH4, so it makes me think it's a GH5 problem, but maybe Metabones needs to update in order to talk to the GH5. We'll see. Jujoku says, out with an update to fix all these new issues with the GH5. Yeah, it's early adopter problems. That's kind of how it goes. You buy something first off the shelf, it's bound to have a few bugs. By the way, if you check my YouTube profile, some first impression video there for GH5. Oh, Dimitri's got some videos on the GH5. Awesome. Go check those out with footage and comparisons to the XT2. Sweet. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you. I'm going to wrap this up. Ending it now. I appreciate everyone who tuned in, and we'll do more of these because I enjoy them. They're fun. I like seeing the chat, and can have talks about other cameras and other things later down the road. Thanks.